I want to welcome you all to the 6th annual Free the Seeds Fair. This is our first time going virtual, and we're excited to share our workshop with you today in the comfort of your own home. We're looking forward to being in person together again next year. Free the Seeds is a community-based project of farm hands and rooted in building a sustainable and resilient future through real seeds, real food, and real skills. While this is a free event, it takes time and money to make it happen. If you'd like to support these efforts, please go to freetheseedsmontana.com to donate. So I'm going to introduce our presenter today. Today we have Patti Armbrister. Patti lives in Hinsdale and owns a consulting business called the Agrarian Food Web. She also has an educational farm and garden talk show called Grow Live with Patti and Jackie every Saturday morning. She's passionate about helping folks grow healthy, nutritious food and to create a healthier future for us all. Today, Patti will teach us about beneficial insects and pest management. And with that, we're going to start with a small video of Patti, and then we will go into her presentation. So thank you all for joining us.
Hello, I'm Patti Armbrister. Nice to meet you. I'm standing in my backyard here, and it's a little bit cold out, but it's okay. So I thought I'd share a few things with you today. This yard will be showing you a little bit here as the day goes along, but this is what it's looking like here. Show you a little bit about where I'm growing here, a few different things. This is some of the growing beds. This growing bed here is where we had the kale, and you'll see in the show that I got for you, ready for you. We'll talk about that in a minute. But in this high tunnel is where I grew a lot of the summer crops, like your tomatoes, cucumbers, strawberries, things like that. But in the floor of it, here underneath the tomatoes, is sweet Alyssum. And that sweet Alyssum is went to seed. We'll talk a little bit more about that plant as we go along. But then check this out. Right, it's January, and look at them guys. It will not be long, and we'll be munching on some greens. Well, I'm here to present to you today some ways to be more successful in gardening. Last year, in our area, lots of gardens were just inundated by flea beetles, and those flea beetles just ate their wonderful kale and broccoli and radishes, all those types of plants, that whole family, they ate to the ground. Well, I had some flea beetles too. I think every garden's going to have some, but I had plants that were able to resist them completely, or they were unscathed completely. Others were really riddled by them, and others put up a good fight and was able to keep on growing through the season. But I'm going to share with you today, that is the bee friend, what's left of it. I harvested it. Let me show you another plant. I'll walk over to the school so I can make my point. I'm going to show you some American plums. This is what they look like today, and this is what they're going to look like in another 5 weeks. Let's go inside, and I will show you what I'm talking about. See you soon.
And with that, Patti is going to start her presentation. Thanks, Patti.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today at Free the Seeds. It's super exciting, even though it is online. But this time of year always makes me feel really good knowing that I'm going to get together with gardeners that really want to grow healthy food. So that makes me feel really good. Today, we are talking about attracting beneficial insects and some pest control. And like Gretchen said, I have a little talk show on Saturday mornings called Grow Live with Patti and Jen. That's Jackie from the Green Grower Garden podcast. And you can get more information and education from me on my YouTube channel. So hopefully you can look me up there. And of course, we're on other social media too. So this is where I've been growing to give you some ideas of where I've gotten my education from recently, at least in the last 10 years. I'm 61 years old, been growing since I was a toddler, getting paid by the time I was 8 years old to pick strawberries. But I've learned more in the last 10 years than all those other years combined. That has been amazing. So in the picture here, you can see there's the big greenhouse is the Sleeping Buffalo greenhouse that I'll refer to. And it's a 96-foot, 30 by 96 foot in hot water and floor. So that offers me a high-speed education in 1 year, that what we can grow there and what we've learned there. It's just been amazing. The backyard picture with the high tunnel, that is my backyard. And I've turned my yard into a edible vegetable production instead of a yard. So I'm really promoting growing food and not grass. And in the picture there with the compost, that's where I make my own compost. Learn tremendous amount in that little area too. The other little greenhouse is the passive solar at the Hinsdale School. Been operating that since 2010. Just unbelievable being able to utilize that. And then the garden up in the upper corner is a garden that I consulted on with a close friend here in Hinsdale, that we've created a regenerative garden. And so those are where I'm kind of coming from. This is my backyard, different shot of the backyard, to give you some ideas of where I'm coming from, what I've learned. This is inside the buffalo. Okay, so like I said, I've learned a lot in the last few years. It's just been dumbfounding. I thought I knew quite a bit before the last 3 or 4 years, but I have learned so much that it's just crazy. So one thing I've learned for sure is becoming part of the whole system, and not being the person in charge. And so I'm reducing control and embracing nature. And I think it's almost against human nature, but somehow we've got to get back to that point of that's what our goal is. So I used to thought that I grew pretty good plants, right? Those look pretty good, right? Lots of food. I thought were healthy plants, but in the last 3 years, I've figured out that I've got a lot of room for improvement. And so I'm going to share with you a little bit about how you can do that and what I'm thinking about. But first, I got to give some credit to the people that I've learned a lot from in the last 10 years. Been amazing. Ride of education, just out of self-knowledge and wanting to learn. Nicole Masters in the upper corner with Laura Reinhardt in the regenerative garden. Myself and Dr. Jill Clapperton in the middle. Dr. Jonathan Lundgren, I'll refer to him here in a minute, and many, many others. And better think about who we're doing this with, right? So my educational ride has been with lots of people from lots of walks of life, and of course, my own son in the lower corner, and the kids I work with every day. So, like I said, I need to figure out how I'm going to move from growing what I thought was healthy plants to growing really healthy plants. So we're going to dig deeper into this education and share it with you today. So we're supposed to be talking about beneficial insects and how can we help them. So that's going to be our main focus here in the beginning, is the insects. And look at that girl. Did you know that was a girl? That's a queen bumblebee. Do you think we have a bee problem? So I think I got a poll there for you to answer that question. I think we have management problems. And this is one of them, right? Here in the United States, I think there's 40 million acres of lawn. Okay, and it's the largest crop that gets irrigated is our lawns. That I think that's a mismanagement. For some reason, we've got a vendetta against these dandelions, and that queen honeybee, she's like a grizzly bear. She hibernated all winter. She's pregnant, and she's the big one. When you look at her, she's the size of the end of your thumb, not the little tiny ones you see later in summer. And she is going to have a whole colony of 60, 70 bees if she makes it through the winter and on into production. And she really needs these early blooming plants, which for some reason here in America, we think they're a sin that we got to get rid of. And I think if you listened to Todd earlier, you would understand that you have a soil management problem, not a weed problem when we have dandelions. So just to give you an idea of what this queen bumblebee would have ate before we turned our lawns into a monocrop is this is the native prairie in Montana. And this is more referring to what Todd was talking about and different things with diversity. But these bees are just the messenger. We really don't have a bee problem. We've got a much bigger problem than that. They're just the messenger. We have a problem with all the insects are all dying out all over the world. So when we think about management problems, probably the first finger we want to point at, of course, is how we're managing our lawns and what we do with them, right? And that is a big problem. And we do need to stop doing what we've been doing with that. And we do need to start embracing letting some of these wilder places with dandelions and other weeds that are in bloom for these insects to be able to use and live. We need to leave them alone and start figuring out how to manage our soils differently so we don't have the dandelion if we choose to not have the dandelion. Another finger we point at when we talk about management problems, we look at the monocrops in the United States. This is canola, and it's just one of the three major ones with our corn, soybeans, and canola. And unfortunately, Big Ag is using a neonicotinoid seed treatment, which is an insecticide that's systemic, and it stays in the plant cells. And so that's definitely affecting the bees, right? But it's affecting way more than that because it travels in the water. It's affecting white-tailed deer, all kinds of things that it's affecting humans. We just haven't studied it. That we need to know where's these problems stemming from. I bet you didn't think that I would point a finger at this resource management problem because this is the plug industry for bedding plants and they use neonicotinoids. I don't think they are in the vegetable seeds, or I sure hope not, but they are in the bedding plants. So how many of you have seen a bee in a flowering greenhouse full of flowers? I've worked in those greenhouses and I've only seen one. Doesn't that ring a bell that something's wrong? There is something wrong. Next, we kind of think, okay, well, it must be all those other things that's the problem. Do we ever think that it might be how the gardeners manage their land? Most of the time we wouldn't think of that, but we're going to think about that a little bit today. So this is Dr. Jonathan Lundgren, and I went and volunteered with him for a week at Blue Dasher Farm. Learned so much in 1 week that it's just unbelievable, but this is his quote: if you want to save the bees, first you need to save the soil. And that goes along with what Todd was talking about. And hopefully everybody got to see Todd's presentation. If you haven't, make sure you go back and check it out. So first, what do we need? What do these insects need to live anyhow? Why do we think we have such a big insect problem? Well, it turns out they need the same thing we do: food, water, shelter, air. So that's where this gardeners and market gardeners and farmers management could change to really help them, because this is what they need. And unfortunately, it's kind of what we've been destroying. So these are some of the beneficials that we're going to talk about today to gain deeper knowledge. So first, I want to talk about the food sources that we could manage differently and we can plant. So we'll first talk about the plants, then we'll talk a little bit more about the life cycles of the insects so that we can understand what's going on, and then we'll really address some pest issues. So after those dandelions are shot, the first plants that are going to bloom in my area, at least, is the native bushes. And so the currants, and then these are American plums, they come first, and they are just welcomed armed by the pollinators. Yesterday, when I was in the passive solar greenhouse, there was a bee come in, and I was like, wow, you're like a month and a half early. But they're already out, right? Because we got some warm weather and stuff. So they really need resources. They need places and things to eat. So think of planting diversity, planting native plants, and having flowers in succession. So this is a succession that comes next in my growing environment is the chives. They come in super early. And I've noticed a lot, I do a lot of traveling, and I do go to a lot of gardeners and a lot of farm schools, all kinds of things. And I've noticed a lot of people are starting to plant some of the right plants, but they don't always plant them in mass enough to make a difference. And so what I mean in here is these chive plants, that's about a 16-foot row of chives. And it literally is covered with bees for the whole time period of about 10 days that they're feeding on those chives. And so that's a reliable source to get them through on into times when there's lots of plants in bloom. So I'm going to give you some key plants that will really help your habitat to help the beneficials. And borage is a mainstay in my growing environments. It's fantastic. The bees love it. It's edible, and those little tiny blue flowers taste like cucumbers. Kids love them, and they self-seed. And they also are a composting plant. So I'll use them in a compost. I also make them into a plant tea, and they're a soil builder. You can't say enough about them. They do self-seed. So like if you as a market gardener, you probably are going to want to put these on the borders or the corners and not in the middle, right? Unless you want to weed them out, because you will be weeding them out. In my world, I weed out what I don't want and keep the others. But you just need to know which ones are going to self-seed and which ones aren't. These are intertwined with the cabbage in there. So there's cabbage in there, and potatoes, and borage in this picture, and nasturtium. The nasturtium is really a ground cover in this picture. And when you have your cabbages intertwined with these flowers, and usually flowers that kind of canopy a little bit over the cabbages, you are not going to have any problems with cabbage loopers or the cabbage moths, because they get so confused with all that nectar source, they can't even find the cabbages, right? And if they don't lay their egg on the family of those rhockuses, they don't survive. Their life cycle is broken. So just that one little tip of planting those flowers intertwined with them is a ticket to not having so many problems. I don't know if this will play without giving us too big of troubles, but we'll see. This is a bee friend. Its real name's Facilia. And it's just fantastic at bringing in the pollinators. And we think of the pollinators just being the honeybees, the bumblebees, and the bigger bees, but it is just loaded with these tiny itty bitty insects that you can hardly see. That is just amazing. It's an amazing plant. It's a soil building plant. The regenerative people use it in their cover crops and stuff. And it is also another self-seeder. So I've never had to replant it after I got it started. So this is what it looks like when it's a close-up to it. And you can trim it back so you can deadhead it, and it will come again. So I think if you attempted to do that, you could probably do that 3 times and get 3 times as much nectar source for those nectar and pollen sources for those insects. And you always have to have a magnifying glass to see the itty bitty insects that come to these plants. That it's amazing that we kind of need to embrace them all. We only think about the big named ones, but there's a lot more to think about. There's also the seed. This plant is super easy to harvest seed from. And so once you plant it the first year, it will definitely be pollinated, right? It's going to germinate. It will self-seed, but it also, you can save seed and then be able to share seed easily with that plant. Here's another self-seeding plant. I showed you in a little video in the high tunnel. This is at Sleeping Buffalo, where we're using a white sweet Alyssum. This is the old sweet Alyssum. It's not a hybrid. That you could save seed on it. It just self-seeds itself in this greenhouse. So all I do is transplant the plants where I want them or weed out what I don't want. But it makes an incredible nectar source for itsy bitsy predator type insects and the beneficial wasp, right? That lay eggs inside of other insects. That is our pest control. That small tiny flowers, and there's billions of them on there, right? And that plant's been pruned back 2 or 3 times to get it to be that bushy, but to have that much flower source, and every time it starts to go to seed, I trim it back and give even more food source for the beneficials. Another plant that's the mainstay in every growing environment I think it should be in. I mean, even if I had a pivot, I'd be putting it in the corners of the pivot. I put it in the corners of your fenced in market gardens. I put it in the corner of my houses. I would put it anywhere I could, let alone it's beautiful, but it is an incredible plant that this trailing nasturtium, this particular one trails a good 6 foot or longer. There used to be 2 or 3 different kinds of trailing nasturtiums, one that trailed 3 foot long, and then this big one. I don't know, I haven't been able to find the 3 foot trailer lately in seed catalogs, but this one will self-seed and you could collect seed off of it. And it pulls in aphids and flea beetles and some other insects here I'll talk about in a minute. Plus it doesn't need fertilizer. It does not need babied at all. So it will help control aphids, squash bugs or beetles, cucumber beetles, whiteflies, and cabbage moths, just from this one plant. So, and I don't mean just one particular individual plant. I mean the species of plant, right? So I went to a greenhouse one time and these people had been to some of my talks who are new to plant nasturtiums, and they had aphids in their greenhouse and they were like all over their place and they were highly upset, you know, and stuff. And they says, well, where's your nasturtium? Says, oh, we grew nasturtium. I says, well, where is it? Well, they showed me this little tiny plant that was 6 inches big that had been attacked by the flea beetles and the aphids, and it was ready to die. I'm like, that's not enough nasturtium. That's why you want these big ones that can really do the work. They're a workhorse, right? You want them in your system. They do great in pots, so you can put them in pots and move them around. They make a great trap crop. I can't say enough about them. And they're super easy to grow, right? They don't need babied. Next key plant is comfrey. This is another plant that I'd have in the corners of every growing environment, right? Or under the drip edges of your orchard. The bees love it. And I've caught on to the bees love all the deep-rooted plants, horseradish, all of them. Anything with a really deep-rooted plant, it only makes sense, right? That plant is putting out root exudates all the way up and down its root system. It's bringing in nutrients and everything from a deep area of your soil, not the top 6 inches, that those bees know something we don't know, that we need to be catching on to that. This plant can get away from you, and you won't kill it after you put it somewhere, so you got to make sure you put it where you want it the first time. I put it in corners of yards, corners of your deer fence, stuff like that. And it comes on early and fast, and I can harvest it 3 times to make it into a compost. Either compost
into the compost or a plant tea. This is the plant tea, so it easily can be made into a plant tea. So have you ever wondered, I've wondered this before I did all this research, as to how in the world are they getting organic lettuce? When it seemed like when I plant lettuce or spinach, the first thing that wanted to attack it is aphids. I'm like, how are they doing that? That can't be. Well, turns out this is how they're doing it. This is Dr. Eric Brannen's work at the Lettuce Project in California. And you'll have to look up his information on the web. It's very, very good. They've planted 10%. So every 10th row is sweet alyssum in this romaine lettuce. And the whole field is a monocrop except for the sweet alyssum. And their exterior border, they have a hedgerow all the way around it because they're in chemical ag country. Every other farmer close by them are spraying with planes and everything else, with every kind of insecticide and pesticide and herbicide you can imagine. And so they have a hedgerow, but the hedgerow is really for the beneficial insects, and it's perennial and annual plants that are self-seeding with nectar source and a harboring place, right? These insects need a place to harbor and live. And so this is the Tactin flies. Those are the ones that they're using on those romaine lettuce fields. So that fly all by itself is able to control the aphid problem in those organic lettuce fields. I don't know why every organic farmer wouldn't be doing this. I mean, it's so simple, and sweet alyssum seed is cheap and it doesn't take up much space. It's not going to hurt your production in any way, shape, or form. I just say, just do it. So we need to gain a deeper understanding here, because now I've taught you a little bit about some plants that are must-haves to really help you be highly successful. But we're going to dig a little deeper here into the pests, right? So like I was telling you earlier, I thought I grew really good plants until I fully understand now, and this will be my first year, it's going to be very exciting, that I am going to try to grow healthier plants that will not attract pests, right? So the healthier plant is determining if you have pests or not. So it's a deep pill to swallow, and it's hard to wrap your head around. But when Nicole Masters talks about the 5 M's, and it's your mindset that's got to change, it really is our mindset that's got to change, because healthy plants don't have pests. It's a hard one to get around. So let's see, what we end up with. A lot of people had aphids. 77% of us had some pest problems last year. And you guys must not be in flea beetle country. We're in flea beetle country because we're out here in the prairie. It's hot, it's dry. Flea beetles love that. And we have cover crops here and canola, and the flea beetles love those plants, and they're just going like heydays, right? So huge problems for our gardeners with flea beetles. So kudos to you guys for not having them. But so it always pays to kind of understand a little more about what's going on with these insects. So you need to really understand which ones are consuming plant sap and how they do it, to really start understanding a little bit about who's doing what. Oh yeah, look at those slugs. They're another problem, right? And I hope that we'll do a webinar workshop just on slugs, but I'm still in deep education on them, but I'm gaining lots of ground. I have plenty of slugs, but we're making headway. Okay, thanks for that poll, Gretchen. That's great. Right, so we got to dig into these life cycles. I think a lot of us, and I know I didn't until I did all this studying, didn't really understand the life cycles of what was going on and how they're intertwined. Can you take the poll down, Gretchen? So we'll just talk about the flea beetle here for a second.
You just have to minimize it, Patti.
I got to minimize it. You're gonna make me do some double work, huh?
You're doing a great job.
Screens, that makes it more work to even find my mouse. Okay, and so The life cycles are super important. Let me get my mouse back to my other computer. So these are the flea beetles. They live with the Brachus family, and they chew those little tiny holes in to get to the sap that's in between the layers of the plant leaves. And like I said in the video, I had some plants that were attacked by them, like that. Others that died from them. Others that resisted them completely. And some of them side by side like this. When I got to this point this summer and seen that, and I was like, wow, it's true that a really healthy plant doesn't have pests, because look at the kale in the background versus the red kale in the upper corner. The one in the upper corner, the red one's gotten attacked by flea beetles. Granted, it fended itself off. And when it did fend itself off, it got stronger and it's probably more nutritious than the one that didn't. That's something to wrap our heads around too. Is a little bit of pest damage only strengthens those plants. But then I learned that those plants are sending signals to those pests, and that they're actually calling the pest into the particular plant, like radar, to come right to the plant that's having trouble. So the plant's sending those signals for the insect to come in there and attack it and wipe it out. The two curly kales aren't sending a signal. It's like the pest can't even see them, according to Jonathan Lundgren, anyhow. They can't see them. Like, that's amazing. So understanding this life cycle is really crucial for those of you that have aphids. What do you do when you first see some aphids? What's the first defense, right? We go wash them off, or we scrape them off. We do anything we can do to get them off. We need to stop and think about whose life is intertwined with those aphids. So the kids and I in the school garden, we just embrace them. We're like, yes, we got some aphids and sunflowers, because then we can study them, right? So understanding their life cycle and how they're intertwined with other insects is super important. So the wasp in the lower corner is a black wasp, and it lays its eggs inside an aphid, 1 egg per aphid. It can lay 200 eggs. The aphid in the upper is a winged adult aphid. When the colony gets to a certain point and gets so big, they get wings and they leave. They go make a colony somewhere else. But I also think that they're doing that when the black wasp shows up, because the black wasp will wipe out this colony in no time. It's just simply amazing. So this is the black wasp. Yep.
Sorry, there was a flea beetle question. Can I ask it for you quick?
Sure.
From Laura, do flea beetle eggs overwinter in the soil? Flea beetles keep ruining my earliest brassica seedlings.
Yes, yes, they do. And here in Eastern Montana, they'll have 2 and maybe 3 life cycles in one growing season. So say it's early in the spring and they're just coming out in June, right? So the best defense is to get those plants really big and really healthy before you plant them outside. And if we can get them healthy enough, we'll talk about that in a minute, the flea beetles won't mess with them. Just like my example, those 2 kale plants, they won't mess with them. But if they're not healthy enough, they're going to attack them, right? And as they live out their life cycle, if they get successful in that first generation, they're going to lay more eggs in the next generation. So the best defense for that is having a healthy soil food web, because they're laying eggs in the soil, and so they can get ate in the soil. So anything that lives its life cycle out in the soil could get controlled in the soil. That would be with beneficial nematodes, and even slugs eat the larvae of these beetles. So yeah, there's so much to learn. I hope that answered a little bit of her question, but we'll get a little deeper into it in a second. So this is the aphids and the black wasp. So if you see the picture over here on your right-hand side, would you think you got a problem? You shouldn't. you shouldn't think you got any problem, because the black wasp was already wiped the aphid colony completely out. And the lady beetles and the flies, they all come in. They come in after the colony. I have a great little YouTube on this part of it that I'd like you to go to and watch. It will help you out. Oh, let's see, I gotta get to my other screen. So this is some of the intertwining I'm talking about with the aphid colony. So all of those insects, and probably numerous others that I don't know anything about, are living their life cycle within the aphids, right? So we actually want the aphids, but I want them in sunflowers and not in spinach and kale and my greens, right? So you plant branching tall sunflowers, and believe me, those sunflowers are going to call in those aphids, and they're going to come to them instead of your other greens and things. Here's a closer up picture of them. So the black wasp lays their eggs inside the aphid, and then they puff up a little bit and they get brown. And so what's happening is the larvae of the wasp is eating the aphid from the inside out and killing them. So each wasp will kill 200 aphids. So we got to remember those little tiny wasps, they need places to get nectar and food, right? That's where your sweet alyssum's coming in. Even your bee friend is helping with that. We won't watch this right now. Try to get off this. So, well, maybe we won't. What the heck? Well, maybe we won't. Welcome to the garden.
We can't really hear it, just so you know.
Okay, we'll stop it. Sorry about that. We'll get you. Oh, new one. There we go. So this is where the black wasp, there'll be a tiny hole in that cocoon when it hatched and got out. So what do we do in the fall? We clean the garden, right? If we had black wasps taking care of the aphids, and I didn't have any aphids in my spinach, and I had these cocoons, the last thing I want to do is take that plant debris all out of the garden. I needed to stay in the garden because that's where the eggs are at, of the black wasp. We had so many aphids in the sleeping buffalo the first year that we ran it, that it was just, we literally had millions, if not billions, of aphids that they was able to get under control with the black wasp and the nutrition of the plants. Like within a week, it was dumbfounding. So we want to keep those eggs in the garden. So if we know we had the black wasp, we don't clean those out of the garden, right? Keep them in the area. The next year we had so many black wasps ahead of the aphids, we never had an aphid problem, right? They took care of them before they even started. Here's a picture of the sleeping buffalo. These are black aphids and radishes. So you can also plant some trap crops for them too. This is another picture of the sweet alyssum underneath the tomatoes. It's in high tunnel. Radishes make a good flea beetle and aphid trap crop. So does mustard. Not so much for the aphids, but for sure for the flea beetles. And so I plant mustards in pots, right? And those early flea beetles that come out went to those mustards in the pot because they're going to go to a stressed plant, right? The potted plants are more stressed than the ones in my beds. So the aphid or the flea beetles went to those mustard plants, and I put a black garbage bag underneath the pot, waited for the flea beetles to get down in the soil under the plant canopy, because that's where they go in the evening, and they're not flying or jumping around then. Pulled the sack up over the top of it, tied it shut, and then set it in the sun the next day. And I killed 200 or 300 or more flea beetles in one pot of mustard. So there's some things you could do to really help yourself. That was also
Patti, Can
Yeah.
you explain a little bit more what you mean by trap crops?
Yeah, a trap crop, I plant, like, let's say those radishes, I would plant them away from the cabbages and the broccoli and cauliflower, kale, the plants that they want to attack. I plant the aphid or the trap crop away from them in a different location in the garden. And preferably, if I'm going after a flea beetle, it's going to be in a hot, sunny location, because that's what the flea beetle loves, right? They're not going to want to go into my cool bed where my kale is at, because it's a shaded, more cool bed. So I can trap them by pulling them to a hot, sunny location in the garden with the radishes and nasturtiums and mustards, and take them away from my target plants until I can get my plants healthier. So here's just a lacewing. We're not going to talk about that, but we do want to talk a little bit about Dr. Jonathan Lundgren's work and his researchers. And this is what they call a hairball of insects. So if you look at any one number on that screen is representing an insect, and this is how much they're intertwined with other insects. And here's just a few of the ones that we want in our growing environment that I know very little about, right? We want them. So we just got to start thinking differently of what our mindset's going to be. So reducing the disturbance improves the plant health. Here's some suggested things that you can do to help yourself. Plant flowers in succession. Varied flower structures, that's different sizes, types, and kinds, and colors. Don't baby the plants, right? Because over babying plants makes stress plants. It's hard to believe, and they don't have this deep root system. The deeper the root system, the healthier the plant's going to be. Leave structure in the garden until spring. Water needs to be available to these guys, right? Mulch, and don't have bare soil. Todd went over that really well. And plant native plants. There's a lot of insects that are intertwined with the native plants that don't have anything to do with these hybrids, so we need them. Here's my list of suggested plants. This is just a short list, but it's a good list to help you kind of get going. So what do you think your plant health was last year? From 1 to 10. You know, if I answered this survey 2 years ago, I would have said, man, my plants are probably a 8 or a 9. Now, if I answered it, I would be saying maybe they're a 6. Right? I had a lot to learn. All right, so I'll just minimize this, then they can keep going on it, I think. Oh, no, maybe not. So yeah, a lot of people are thinking we're in the mid-range, the 6 to 7. Nobody thinks they got a 10.
You
That's
can
good.
minimize
Nobody
now.
thinks. What's that?
You
Okay,
can
so
minimize it now.
here's your short list of plants that you want in your environment, and you want them to go to maturity. Collect the seeds off of them. Your fennels and carrots and all of those guys are really good. Can't seem to get my mouse to go back where I want it to. There we go. So here's some perennials we definitely like to see. It's all of our flowering perennials. Native sunflowers, been ignored, right? Sunflowers oriented in this country. They went over to Europe and got modified and brought them back. Native grasses, I can't say enough about that. Wow. Jonathan Lundgren's research this year found out that they tore apart, I don't know how many thousands of bee stomachs to find out what they were eating. Don't you think they're eating pollen and nectar? That's what we've always been taught, right? Over 60% of what they consumed was grass pollen. People, we need to be getting native grasses and bunch grasses in our environment because they need them. So we got to get a little deeper knowledge of what we're doing here. So here's some of our buddies, right? These are what we consider our pests. But John Kemp has taught us, and if you haven't studied John Kemp, you need to. He's developed the plant health pyramid. He's taught us through the pyramid here that if we have healthy plants, we don't have those pests. And so the plant is actually, like I said earlier, calling in the insect pest to attack it. The plant can control if it gets a broken leaf or whatever, it can stop sending nutrients to that leaf, and the pests are going to come in and wipe that leaf out. There's all sorts of things going on that we don't understand. We need to kind of embrace how are we going to get there. So once we understand a really healthy plant doesn't have these pests, then our goals change. Our goals change to these pests and insects are just an indicator for us that we need to get better soil health and we need to get better plant health. So nitrogen is a huge culprit, huge, that we're over fertilizing, even organic farmers, which is hard to believe that we still are putting out too much nitrogen. Causes a huge problem because as soon as that nitrogen is a nitrate in it, the insects attack, right? And the plant's screaming like, I got nitrates, don't let anybody eat me, come in and kill me. And so the insects, pests attack the plant because they can digest that type of nitrogen. When it's got soluble nitrogen in the plant, the insect can't digest it. They can't survive on it. They don't even touch it. They won't touch it. So we just got to really dig a little deeper in what we're knowing and what we're doing. There's talking about that. This is what we want though, right? We want to have this. This is a regenerative garden that's got white Dutch clover in the walkways. So just tremendous amounts of nectar source for insects and places to harbor. The whole thing is mulched, just like Todd taught us this morning. And lots of beneficial plants. So, like I said about deep rooted plants, we want to encourage our annuals to become deep rooted plants. So we don't want to over water them, right? Water once a week on a deep watering will help you get lots healthier plants. And once we understand the plant pyramid, we get to the upper part of the plant pyramid and in plant health 3 and 4, the plant gets so healthy that it's actually producing lipids and it gets a fat layer on it. And so this is how a gardener can tell, am I getting to the uppers of 3s on my plant pyramid? Is if you got that waxy coat on top of your broccoli and kale and stuff you can see in this bed where it's just starting to form. Once that starts forming, I didn't have any insect problems. Once it gets a really thick coat, I have 0 insect problems. Here's another example of extremely healthy plants that didn't have any pest problems. So this is just a recap. It's just for the slideshow. I'm not going to go over it. But your plants can mount their best defense all by themselves if they're healthy enough. So it's our job as gardeners to figure out how to get them healthier. So some ways is your compost extracts and your mulches and your compost. Those are all ways that are going to help you do that. So after what you learned today, do you think we have an aphid problem here? No, we don't. The black wasp is already wiping them out. This plant went right on, even though those blooms are covered with aphids, this plant went right on and still went into full production with no problems. Super healthy fruit after that attack. So what about this? Should we do anything? Well, we'd probably like to get rid of the cabbage looper, but not to the aphids, right? That whole leaf is pollinated with black wasp eggs. So we want to keep that around. So here's some examples of some of those plants we've been talking about. And another picture of that regenerative garden. And I heard somebody asking Todd's slideshow about plant placement. And yeah, in a regenerative mulch garden, you can get away with tighter plantings because They're mulched. There's no soil exposed to the sun. They're retaining moisture better. Here's another picture of it. Oh, yeah, this was going to be a little video. Oh, I guess it will show. So this is the owner of that regenerative garden, and this is in the 3rd year. And she's showing us the soil. That's how much mulch she has on her soil. When we started in this garden, it was solid clay, and it was clay to the point where the magnesium had made it into bricks. Like Todd was talking about, just solid bricks of misery. She was ready to quit gardening. She had actually used her bobcat with the forks on the bobcat to dig carrots the year before I started helping her. I'm like, we can fix all these problems. She thought I was crazy. But I convinced her to put in this regenerative garden and do the regenerative practices. And at the 2nd year, she told her husband to sell the tiller. And he's like, what? Sell the tiller? But I just bought a 2nd tiller. And she's like, sell both of them then. I read my lips, I'll never, ever till again. Because her soil is so wonderful and so fantastic that you can just put your hand down deep in it. And now she's into her 4th year. It's just, she can grow anything, anywhere. Just is amazing. So let's go back to this. We got some questions, Gretchen? I'm sure there must be a couple.
Only if you're ready for them.
We're ready. Yep.
All right. All right. So we have a question from Stephen. I also have big problems with grasshoppers. Garden is surrounded by short prairie grass.
Yes.
What works against grasshoppers?
Yeah, huge problem all over eastern Montana last year. I think if we, and I know people don't want to hear this, but we need to look at the bigger picture. How long ago was it since it was grazed properly? I'm talking about the prairie, not your garden. Of when those bison and those elk herds and those huge antelope herds and stuff left. It's been that long ago since the prairie was healthy. I know that's not something you want to hear, but I think what you need to do is your outside edges of your growing area. And I did this in a garden that it was alongside a track field that was just inundated with grasshoppers. And so it was a regenerative garden. It was all mulched and we were watering once a week in there. And I noticed where I watered over, right? It was a sprinkler at the time. So where I overwatered into the lawns, it was green grass and the grasshoppers went there, right? Ideal place for a grasshopper to go. They really don't want to be in your garden. So if you give them a place by giving them lots of water on grass plants and don't mow them, give them a place to harbor, that's where they're going to be. And then you'd bring in the chickens and the ducks, right? If you really want to get rid of them, then they would go in there and help start taking care of them. So you got to almost give them a place. There is a bait that I think it's either a nematode or a bacteria, I can't remember which, that they'll feed to the grasshopper. That grasshopper will die, then another grasshopper cannibalizes on it, and then they all die from the cannibalizing, from the biologic. But I consulted on a garden on that same problem this year already, and they're already out of bait that she can't find the biologics. So your best chance, if you can't find the biologics, is to definitely make a place for them by irrigating.
Our next question is from Cecilia. What do you do when we have daily rains early in the growing season and plants don't develop deep roots?
I'm not in your growing environment, so I would guess I would get you to talk to Todd more on that, of how to deal with it. It sounds like he's using some tarps to control how much water actually goes into his soil. So I don't know if you watched Todd's, but if you haven't, go back and watch it. That would probably help you. So you could keep it covered until you absolutely have to get in there. I do know that the more organic material you got in the soil, the more it's going to be able to help yourself. Sorry, I'm not in your environment. I'm in a hot, dry, cold environment, which is kind of zone 3.
And we'll have those workshops, all the recordings we'll be sharing soon. So, okay, our next question is, could you talk about the lipids on broccoli leaves?
Mm-hmm. So the broccoli leaves are, have you seen them before? The lipids, it just looks like a waxy coat and you can take your thumb and wipe them right off, right? And so if you have them, most of the time a broccoli plant or kale plant will have it. Cauliflower are really good at having it, but you'll see them get darker and heavier as the season goes along if they're healthy, the plant. If the plant's not healthy, it's just got this light sheen of it on there, but it'll get so thick you're like, wow, I don't hardly wipe this off. That's when your plant is super healthy, right? And it's not going to have any problems with anything when it's that healthy. And so it's the plant putting on a layer of fat, just like, unfortunately, I put on a layer of fat this winter from being in the house too much. So that's what the plant's doing. So a plant that's not healthy isn't putting on that fat layer. So trying to keep it as layman's terms as I can to make it easy for you. But that wax layer is going to be on all plants. I used to think, yeah, it's only on my broccoli and kale. Then I really realized, oh, that same waxy layer is on my fruit trees. It's on my sunflowers. It's on my corn. It's on everything that gets healthy enough. It's just that I didn't grow plants healthy enough until now, and now realize that's the signal. So that's the signal for you as a gardener to see if I've got it, I'm doing great. If I don't, get to putting out more compost tea, more compost extract, stuff like that.
This is probably a question we all need the answer to. We'll see what wisdom you have, Patti. How do you talk to people who don't want to change their practices?
With the tilling, I'm presuming, or which practice? Or, because there's so many of them, right? The big egg farmers that I'm teaching their kids and they're using chemicals, it's until they want to have the conversation, I can't. The best thing I can do is teach, right? And the best thing you could do is teach. Anybody that will listen. Anybody that eats food is who we need to talk to. Because they've got to come to the same realization that I've come to, that like, I could grow healthier plants. They got to come to the same realization I could farm without the chemicals. But it's a much bigger picture than that when it comes to chemical ag, but I don't know which practices she's referring to, so I guess I'll defer.
Okay, our next question is, how do you control the white Dutch clover to stay in your walkways and not infiltrate your beds? I'm assuming looking at this one that we're seeing right now.
Yep, and Laura showed us in that, before she got to that video, she was showing us, I wasn't smart enough to turn my video camera on fast enough, but so right on her edge of where her mulch bed is the white Dutch clover. And there's so much mulch, so you see in the picture, there's like 4 inches of mulch there that the clover doesn't really want to travel into there solidly. It does travel over there, but she just pulls it back. Or if you had edger, you could go right through there with the edger really easily. Then she's into this 4th year now of the white Dutch clover. She did reseed it last year because she had a lot of it winter kill out the year before. But as long as that thick mulch layer is there, it's not going to be a problem. Same way with your crabgrass. If there's enough thick mulch layer there, the crabgrass's roots wants to go underneath of it and not get down into the soil, then it's easy to pull them out. So yeah, she pulls out roots that I'd like to get to transplant and put them somewhere else that she's taken away, right? But every time she mows that white Dutch clover, she's releasing nitrogen in her soil. And she's also throwing it with a lawnmower, the thatch over into the next bed. And then she alternates every time. So she's putting on new mulch every time she mows. And she mows late in the evening, early in the morning before the bees come out, because they have honey bees and they raise honey.
Do you have any advice for ground squirrels stealing strawberries? And then it says, haha. We all probably need advice on that.
Yeah, I am glad I don't have problems with squirrels. I've got some squirrels, but we have very few in our community, and I feed them, but they haven't given me any problems in the garden. But I hear that there can be problems. I would say something, but probably is improper, so I won't.
Yeah, I think I run the healing garden at North Valley Hospital here, and we, when they installed the garden, they dug down deep. They put big wire down below in the ground, and they still somehow figure out how to get in. So
No, they're smart. They do taste good though.
Someone wrote in the chat, nets might be a good idea as well. Yeah. Here's another question. You mentioned deep watering once a week. I have a 12-inch raised bed and live near Creston. What do you do in the heat of the summer? And someone else had asked, how do you know you've deep watered? So you can probably put both of those in that question. Answer.
So I use a moisture probe to figure out if I need to water or not. And that was a big education all itself. I'm like, wow, I've been watered like 2 or 3 times more than I needed to water once I bought that probe. And so I also have everything mulched, right? So I pull back the mulch and I feel with my hands. And I will know, yes, I need to water. Or the plants will give me an indication that, yeah, they're looking a little bit like, yeah, I could stand a shot of water, right? But don't confuse heat stress with need of water. So you need to check, do I need to water or not? So this is where this meter really helps. And so I'm gone a lot. So I have an elder friend help me water. I gave her the meter. I says, you do not water. This says it's all right. And so that saved all of my plants when I'm gone of not getting overwatered. It'll save you a lot of water and a lot of time.
What is that meter?
It's just a moisture probe,
Okay.
and it's got a pH meter on one side of it, so it could test pH too, but I don't mess with that, but it's simple, under $15.
Cool. One person responded to the strawberries saying that she knew someone that painted rocks to mimic strawberries to put out before they arrived, and they deterred the birds. So maybe they would work with squirrels.
Yeah, put them in the trap, the rocks. Maybe they're going to trap for you.
That actually is all our questions. Is there any other participant questions before we wrap up? Patti, do you have anything to wrap up our talk?
I guess I want to remind people of why we're doing this, right? This is my son in the red shirt, and these are some of the kids that I work with every day. And it's about the next generation, and it's about the food we eat. So I'm very passionate about teaching other people how to grow and to grow healthier food. So please contact me if I can help you in any way, and try to maybe subscribe to my YouTube channel. That would help me. And the Free the Seeds resources on their YouTube channel are priceless. And I feel like every time I watch their videos, I feel like they're underutilized. But please go to their YouTube channel and learn some of these things that I'm learning. And the other resources that are available are unbelievable. And they're all free, and they're all free. The seeds just put it right there easily for you to see and use and stuff. So yeah, take a deep dive in your self-education. It will really pay.
I added Patti's YouTube channel to the chat earlier, so you should all subscribe. She has podcasts, as she said, every Saturday, and she's just an amazing resource for us, and has been teaching at Free the Seeds from the beginning. Yeah. We appreciate her beyond words. We're just so blessed to have her knowledge, and just are so grateful that she's willing to share it with all of us. So Patti, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And with that, I guess I would just remind you all that if you can donate, no matter the amount, to our Efforts here, you can go to freetheseeds.com, freetheseedsmontana.com, and donate. And we still have tonight, we have a community conversation with Isa Lund talking about creating edible neighborhoods. And then tomorrow we have Lise Rousseau from Fat Robin Orchard and Dan Getman from Getman's Orchard and Vineyard to teach us about fruit tree pruning. You have to go to our website to register for both those classes. So those are the last two left, and just thank you all so much.
I want to say one more thing, Gretchen.
Yeah.
We really do need to start saving the seeds, right? So I'm purposely gonna go out and plant certain varieties just to save the seed. I'm not even probably gonna eat any of the plant. I taste test it to make sure it's what genetics I want, but you're gonna make a plan. It just doesn't happen if you don't have a plan. So you gotta plan it and make it happen. Like I got some onions right now that are red onions that have stored tremendously well. People say red onions don't store well, so I don't grow them. And these I'm eating this week. They've stored fantastically. And so some are just starting to get a little sprout on them. I'm gonna try to keep them in the cold, keep them in the dark. I'm gonna plant them to save the seed. Maybe I can make my own red onion down the road, a Montana onion. So please be proactive, do some planning. If you like food and you want really good food, then let's get after it.
Well, thank you, Patti. It's been such a pleasure to have you. And we hope you all have enjoyed this Free the Seeds virtual version, and happy planting to all of you.
Yeah.
Have a great rest of your weekend.
Let's grow healthy.